All right, let's go ahead and get going. I want to thank everyone for attending session 3 of our 3D Experience series. I'm Kevin Holbrook, product manager at CAD Dimensions, and I have my partner in crime, Tom Landry, who is also a product manager at CAD Dimensions. And we've kind of embarked upon the last few weeks, kind of just educating our customers on what is 3D Experience and where things are. Tom, what do you think is one of the big takeaways from the last couple of weeks that we want to remind those online that we covered?
Well, one of the biggest takeaways is how much you and I learned, just touching all these pieces. And actually, one of the things that I was most pleased with was the change management tools, which we haven't even shown anybody yet. I think those are really, really valuable. That's going to be a big game changer. Obviously, today we're using the design tools built in the platform, and this was a lot of fun, as people will see in the next half an hour or so.
Yeah, I kind of titled this one a little different: Next Generation Cloud-Based Design Tools. Now we know and love SolidWorks, right? And one of the things that you'll see today is that the cloud-based tools that we're showing you, the X apps, as they're passionately known, is really an extension of what we already know in SolidWorks. A lot of what we love about SolidWorks Desktop has been imprinted in those products, but as the title suggests, they're trying to add versatility and new approaches to how you do things. And with a cloud-based tool, the ability to get access to it from anywhere, it makes a big difference. So what do you say we get started?
Beautiful.
All right. So I think the first thing that we always need to keep at the forefront is giving ourselves a way to describe what is 3D Experience. And depending on who you talk to, you get different responses. It is a platform. It is a cloud-based platform. I've heard people describe it as a business operating system, a communication and collaboration system, even data management system. But the reality of this is it's a platform that provides this versatility of being able to use different devices to connect from anywhere, anytime. And that is into itself one of the things that makes it super powerful. Over the last 2 weeks, we've been introducing you to the 3D Experience platform and how it relates to us as SolidWorks users. And we started out with the basics, the building blocks of the platform, starting out with roles. Roles is, an organization of operations or apps specific to a type of user. Today, we're going to introduce a couple new roles from what we already have. Now, apps are contained within those roles. Those are the individual applications that we launch. And I wanted to highlight one other piece of the building blocks that we covered from week 1, and that's our dashboards. Dashboards is kind of that single spot that we start with in the morning, where we go to begin our day, and it has all of our favorite stuff on it. You're going to see as we begin today, dashboards is one of those key components. Tom, dashboards for you? I mean, is it something that you've customized and you use on a daily basis on the platform?
Yeah, actually, I go into two. I go into the partner platform, where the dashboard gets me through all the local news, what's happening, and catches me up. And then the one that you and I have been using, pretty much just keeping things organized. If dashboards made coffee, I'd be all set.
Perfect. So that was week 1. Week 2, we talked about how the platform enhances what we know of SolidWorks today. We introduced a role called Collaborative Designer for SolidWorks that gave us a vision of how we can connect SolidWorks to the platform, how we can take data and revision manage it and lifecycle manage it out on the platform. And Tom just mentioned change management. That's one aspect of being able to make this connection. So very, very powerful. That's done through a SolidWorks connector tool that connects the platform, and it allows us to put our data out on the platform, which makes it accessible from anywhere. So this was a big part of last week. This week, we're taking a step forward, and we're going to introduce to you 2 new roles. The roles themselves are called 3D Creator and 3D Sculptor. There is a primary app for each role, and that primary app for 3D Creator is called xDesign. Okay, this is browser-based CAD. And then the primary app for 3D Sculptor is xShape. And Tom is going to show you xShape. I'm going to focus on xDesign today. Now, the role of 3D Creator, I've kind of have a little scenario here. And it's going to kind of fit into the types of individuals that might use this particular role. Now, I happen to be an engineer. I travel a lot. I'm always, going from customer site to customer site. So I don't get a lot of time to plant my feet. And maybe this is pre-COVID, right? We don't really travel as much anymore, right, Tom? But, I'm on the road. I don't have access to SolidWorks as much because I have a network license. But I still need to have occasional design work as I'm on the road. I don't need the full power of SolidWorks necessarily. So I'm going to use xDesign, whether it's on my tablet, on my cell phone. I have some mobile devices that I can use for that. So let's see how we can introduce xDesign and xShape, the 3D Creator and 3D Sculptor role, to show you what this might look like. Now we're going to go through four different steps to introduce these. I want to talk about part modeling in xDesign. We're going to get into the assembly modeling. And then when we talk about new technology and new techniques, I'm going to introduce something called design guidance. And then we're going to pass it over to Tom to show you the freeform modeling. So let's go ahead and get started on the part modeling. So every day when I wake up, I grab my cup of coffee and I come out to my dashboard that has all of my information for the platform. And in my dashboard, you'll see that we're having conversations about this monitor stand assembly. Now, I might also decide I want to look at the CAD data while I'm in my dashboard. So I go to my app called 3D Space, and I open my cloud-based viewing software called 3D Play, and I'm able to see the model that I need to redesign. This is the yoke for my computer stand assembly. I get a good visual, and what I really want to do here is I want to reduce some of the weight that I see here. And the Play app is very much like eDrawings. It's it's this cloud-based viewing. Once I get something out on the platform, I can very easily share it with others. And this is where others in your organization will be able to utilize the data. Now, I've also been assigned a task. Okay, the task is to redesign that. So also on my dashboard, I go to the task tab and I let the organization know that I'm working on the yoke redesign. Now, Tom, I see you have a task in there as well. You're going to work on some of the freeform shape with the monitor stand assembly a little bit later, right?
Absolutely.
So that's our communication and collaboration piece, and you can see the dashboard is a big part of that. Now, on the dashboard is also a tab that we created that has my X apps. I have one for xDesign, one for xShape, and I went ahead and I've opened up the monitor stand assembly. Okay. Now, the one thing you'll notice about the interface of this browser-based CAD tool is it's so similar to how we work in SolidWorks. If you envision for a moment the command manager, at the bottom of this interface is something very similar, tab-based access to the tools. Off to the left, what we call the feature manager in SolidWorks is called the design manager in xDesign. In the upper right-hand corner is a tool for us to navigate the various views of the model. So for a SolidWorks user, this is an easy transition. Tom, maybe you can just describe for the folks on the call what the transition was like for you, what your perspective was moving from SolidWorks to learning the XApps.
Well, Kevin, it's actually kind of funny because I had a mouse that I had programmable keys, so I had the S key programmed into my mouse, and my mouse went on the fritz, and I have a 3-button mouse now, so I'm missing my S key, and it messed me up both in SolidWorks, xDesign, and Xshape because I don't feel like reaching out to the keyboard and hitting the S key. So it's so similar in so many ways. It makes life pretty easy.
You bring up a great point. The S key, as you'll see here in a moment, is a valid option when you go to the xDesign tool. So one thing you couldn't see here is that on that tab, I have multiple sessions of xDesign running, and on the other side, I was going to go ahead and start my design for my new yoke. Just like SolidWorks, we grab a plane, we open a sketch, and then I can get access to my sketch tools either through the ribbon bar at the bottom or through the S key. I need to draw 2 circles here. And to size those circles, it's quite interesting when you're out on the XApps. When you select geometry, you're automatically presented with a dimension. No need to select the Smart Dimension tool. And what you're seeing me do here is I'm able to determine through a context-sensitive menu that I want a diameter versus a radius on that, and I can easily select that button and get the geometry. Same color coding we're used to in SolidWorks, underdefined, fully defined, and so on. Go to my features. We can go ahead and extrude this. I'm presented with a dialog that has all of the information like thin features, surface extrusions, mid-plane, putting in the dimensional data all right there. Very heads up, nondescript dialogue for us to interact with. Okay, so here I have kind of the beginnings of my model. I need to continue along, and I'm going to start creating the right side of this, and we're going to do that through another sketch very similar to what we started this as. And I think as you see this go along, hopefully what you're thinking is, I can do this. This is very much like the tools I have today with some added power. I love the ability to be able to select geometry and automatically get dimensions. I'm not having to switch between tools as easily. If I need to add a relationship, such as a horizontal in this case, you'll see the same context-sensitive menu system that we're used to in SolidWorks with some additions. You see that it adds the dimension automatically, so I can easily position it once I've placed that initial circle. There are shortcut shortcut actions from the keyboard. For instance, if I want a line, I could go down and grab my line, or I could hit L on the keyboard to activate it. But I realized in this case, I need to utilize some geometry from the existing boss. By selecting it, the pop-up menu for converting it comes right up. Click drag functions work as well. So I grab my line tool again. I can click drag single use, select the center line in the line, and I can mirror that just as easily through the context menus. Okay. Now, here's where I would need to fully define this through some relationships, and I could just as easily select 2 pieces of geometry and create a relationship, or select an endpoint to create a relationship. To finalize this, I just need to trim this last piece away, and we'll go ahead and extrude this particular boss, which happens to be the right ear on my redesign. We'll extrude this to 30 millimeters. Now, I want you to notice the extrude dialog, that it not only has add material, but remove material, surface extrudes, thin extrudes. It is a bit more comprehensive a dialog box. They've consolidated a bit on those dialog boxes. Tom, what do you think so far? Does this seem pretty simple? Seem like SolidWorks?
Kevin, actually what you just showed it to me is one of the things that when I first learned SolidWorks, I kept hitting, add material when I wanted to take material away. That was like the first couple months I kept doing that. And it's so nice now where it's just a toggle switch.
Absolutely. So let's continue on. What I need to do now is I need to actually shell this thing out. I want to try to reduce some weight. So we'll use the shell feature, remove a face. We're all familiar with this process. We give it a 5mm thickness. And as I'm analyzing the model here, I noticed that I need to kind of make sure that there's an undercut on the backside of this thing. So we'll go ahead and cross-section it so we can see the undercut. Typical commands that you can see off to the side, there's an undercut inside that shell. So one of the things I need to do is edit that feature, right? Now this I absolutely love, Tom. Double click on the feature face and it goes into edit feature. No longer have to right click edit feature and dig for it. Find the face, double click, it takes you right to it. I'm going to give a multi-thickness or a custom thickness to it, and I can go ahead and remove that undercut pretty simply. Context sensitive menus for fillets are built right in just as you would expect. I can go ahead and add my fillets. We can do tangent propagation, full round fillets, advanced functions with fillets. That little pop-up that you see there is an assistant. It's kind of like the selection tools in SolidWorks where you select one edge, it will help you select multiple edges. I didn't use it in this particular case, but that is available. And I'm going to select a bunch of faces to make sure I can add the proper number of fillets throughout this side of the model. And we'll go ahead and accept it. And there we have the good beginnings of my model here. And look over in the design manager form in SolidWorks known as the feature tree. You can see very similar structure, history based, all your sketches are in there. That little slider bar to the left is the rollback. If you drag that thing up, it'll roll back in the tree. So some very nice functions, but things that we're really used to, Tom. Okay. So let's continue on. I need to have the same ear on the left side, but before I do that, I need to create a little cutout on the inside. And I'm going to do this with a revolve. And we'll sketch something on a plane, essentially a rectangle, because that's where I'm going to start with. And, you know, sometimes you may want to pick up an edge to associate it. Other times you may just want to extend it down and add the relationship depending on what you're trying to do. In this case, I just wanted to show that you can still pick up silhouette edges and you can apply those relationships. It's very easy to remove relationships. Select the geometry align, we get our pop-ups for the relations, and you can just click delete on the keyboard as you'd expect. Now I've just created this with some versatility so I can dimension this properly. You can still activate the dimension command. And what I actually want to do is I want to create a dimension that's doubled because I'm going to revolve this thing. And you can see I can't do that between a line. So do we have construction geometry? Of course we do. I select and create a line. I can easily in my context menu create a series of construction lines. Now I can go ahead and dimension between the construction line, get our doubled, set that to 42. The last dimension I need is the angle of the line, and we'll go ahead and set that to 3. Now, like I said, we're going to revolve this. Now, how many times have you accidentally hit the wrong command when going to do something? I did a cut instead of a revolve. Well, I'm adding material. Well, I can actually set it to remove material, right? We talked about that. I could set this to a cut. But this is an extruded cut. I want to revolve. So these are what we call super features. Super features are the ability for us to move between different feature types without breaking the model. Not just a cut to add material, but revolve, loft, extrude, all in one command. Finally, we're all used to this, the ability to mirror. We'll go ahead and mirror the body to the other side. And with that, I am completed on my model. Tom, that super feature to me I've done it myself a bunch of times where you get in. Usually you hit the wrong command and you just say, oh man, I didn't mean to hit this one, and you kind of go back. But there is this class of feature types that you will actually reuse the sketch and switch the type.
Yeah. So Kevin, you got to think about this. These guys got an opportunity to take everything they did well and enhance it and improve upon it. So, right now when I look at that xDesign, I can't do everything Solid does, but the things that I do are just a little bit more refined. It's just got a maturity to it.
Exactly. And I think they took the opportunity to look at workflows and say, how can I minimize everything the user is trying to do when they're designing? And you'll see that the context menus, the pop-up for convert, just everything just seems to be right there when you need it. Okay. So I guess what I want you to take away from part modeling is this is an easy transition. If you need to utilize xDesign for any reason, you have a tool that you're going to be able to pick up today and get started with. But what about assemblies? What about taking that yoke I just designed and putting it inside that assembly, essentially replacing the old yoke to move forward? So to do this, first thing I need to do is save the existing design, right? I'm not saving this to my desktop. I'm not saving this to a drive. I'm just hitting save, and it's out on the platform, saved where it needs to go. I had the assembly open, so I can go ahead and just open that assembly window, and I can get a good look at the yoke. Now, here's one thing that I really love about assemblies. If you double-click on a component, this activation is like edit component. If I double-click on a feature, it brings up the feature. So there's no more edit component, edit feature. I can go back to the assembly just by double-clicking. So just the basic movements in the tree, very, very streamlined. Another thing, your mate folders, just as we're used to here. As I'm getting going here, I want to just let you know that this is actually a single modeling environment. There's no parts, no assemblies. So what we're doing here is we're going to replace the yoke. Now, you'll see me mispick here, but it brings up the search tool for me to find the yoke out on the platform. I can type in the new yoke. It searches using the 3D search tool. Now, I was using a method of drag and drop. You'll notice this drag and drop in a lot of cases works the way you would expect it. But this particular process has a slight variation on that. So I'm going to just search on the new yoke again, and instead of drag and drop, I'm just going to hit OK. And that's going to allow me to grab a component for replacement off the platform and replace it in the assembly. Now you see once it's replaced, the replace made references dialog does come up. Now let me expand on something else that I was mentioning, make sure we're clear. This single modeling environment, I mentioned there's no parts or no assemblies. There really is parts or assemblies, but you don't have to go to a different model to open up to create a part. If I wanted to, I could create a body, turn it into a component, create another body, turn it into a component, and make an assembly out of it. So when we say single modeling environment, it's simple from that perspective, as I'm not having to remember parts and assemblies and building things the way we're used to in SolidWorks. It simplifies it. So Tom, when you look at the assembly functions, I don't see where this is going to trip anyone up. It's just very much SolidWorks-esque.
No, and also, Kevin, if it's a part, if it's an assembly, that's just a parameter. It's just data, so you don't have separate file formats or anything like that. So, it's all data.
It is. All right, let's get this thing wrapped up. I need to replace the mate references. We're familiar with this in SolidWorks. It's going to ask me to replace some references for the mates that are no longer existing from the old yoke. It shows me the associated mate, the mate that was existing. You can see this one's a tangency. If I select this one, it's concentric, and I can provide the proper geometry for each of those. Once I complete all this, it will solve all the mates and reposition the model as you would expect it. Now you'll notice here when I go to replace this mate reference, if you mispick, there is feedback. Watch as I mispick on an edge, it tells me in the corner that geometry is not valid for what you're trying to do. So you get some feedback from the interface, which is really nice. And now I've gotten this replaced. Now it's clear that that doesn't quite fit in there. So trying to understand that, yeah, a little tight for sure. So I got to figure out what I need to do to kind of clean this up. And the best way for me is I'll hit my M key and measure, and we'll try to figure out what kind of distance I need to close up here. If I select the two edges, you can see there's a 10 millimeter distance that I need to kind of close up. I'm going to change the arm. And remember when I said earlier, double click on a model brings you right to it. I double click, it brings me right into edit for that model. I can double click again, and now I can modify the particular feature that I want to change to accommodate the thickness of that part. Now, once I've done that, double click on the top assembly. That brings me out. The only other thing I need to do is similar to rebuild. This is like a control Q. It's a solve, which just goes through and it solves all the mates and everything again, and everything positions itself properly. Now, there's a lot of motion in this thing. As you can see, as I'm dragging this thing around, you know, there's some movement to this. Again, Tom, very, very similar process. I do think as I've used the product, the double click method is going to save a lot of time getting in and out of spots, because we right click and then we click again. We right click and we click again, edit component, edit part, going into these different levels. This is significant time savings.
I noticed, Kevin, my hand doesn't move as much.
Absolutely. Okay. Last thing we need to do here is we need to put a couple cable ties or cable runs in this thing for cable management. And I'm going to search on my 3D search for cable, and you can see I found two of them. Why? Because Tom has one of the same name in his own space. So I can easily identify using what we call tags, which one is my clip. Once I have the clip, I can preview it directly in 3D search. I can see all the property information associated with it, including panning and zooming. And all I have to do is drag from one window to the next and insert it into the assembly. And you see how simple that was? Search, drag, drop. Okay, this shows up in my assembly. There's my cable management clip. I can start to move things around. I have a nice little triad for positioning, a ruler to help me understand distances. And now we're in assemblies. If I want to add a mate, very simple, right? We're used to this. Control select two things we want to make together, and what pops up? Okay, my mates. What do I want to add? In this case, it's a concentric. We'll go ahead and add that mate. It will show up in our mates folder in the design manager, and I can continue to mate this and position it. My last mate is going to be a distance mate, so I'll select two pieces of geometry, and again, my context menu is going to provide me with the mates that make sense. That was a mispick there, as you can see. I did not hold down control, but if I select distance, I can go ahead and select the distance mate. Now, if I want a second clip in here, I want a second clip that's going to be a certain distance from the top clip. I can hold down control and drag drop and make a copy. We're used to that as well. Or using undo, I could just use my linear pattern, which will allow me to do a component pattern in the assembly. We'll take the clip This is another thing that I love, Tom. I go up and show the select direction, but I select the clip and it automatically moves to the next selection in the dialog. I don't have to go over there to click that next box. I see this all throughout the platform X apps as they move for us. Now here's an example of the motion that we have in this thing. There's a lot of motion in here. Okay, so again, new innovative approaches, shortcuts, and refined workflows are going to make this nice, easy transition. Now, we can't really have this conversation about, next generation CAD tools without talking about new technology. And I pulled out one piece of that, and you've seen snippets of things that are different from the desktop tools. But one in particular, design guidance. Design guidance allows me to create geometry while it understands the restraints and forces on a model. Now, I did one that's very simple here. I created a bunch of sketches that represent where my model is going to be restrained or where forces are coming in on my model. And I'm going to let the software help me decide on what types of shapes I need to do that. So the 4 circles represent where the model will be attached to other geometry, other parts. And the plane is going to represent the force for those other parts. So what I'm going to do is we'll go down and we'll select our design guidance tab. And I'll go ahead and add what we call a clamp. A clamp just defines this as a connection piece to other geometry. So it's either bolted or attached to something else. You can see it's very clear to see that. That looks like a clamp. But those surfaces are going to stay in contact at those locations. And then I apply a force, and I can control the direction of that force and the magnitude of that force. In this case, as far as the magnitude, I can type it in, or I can pick from some custom values. I want this to withstand human climbing stairs. Once I do that, I can select the new design, and I can let the software with the artificial intelligence build me some geometry that fits my constraints. You can see the pads where I had the circles has geometry that's staying attached to it. And it's building enough thickness where that force comes in to withstand it. So it's coming up with geometry for me. Now, clearly there's some tessellation in the geometry. Clearly there's some work that needs to be done. But now I have a general shape, a general idea of what I can do. Now, Tom, in a few minutes, I think you're going to show me an app that can help me to do this and create a shape as organic as this. Now, you're going to create the base, but it certainly can be used for this. So design guidance, this is the next generation stuff. This is powerful. Tom, what do you think? You've seen this. What are your thoughts on design guidance?
Yeah, that's pretty darn cool how quick we can come up. Now you picked a material, so right now you actually know, you got a rough estimate of weight and your moments of inertia and everything. You got so much information in seconds.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, very, very powerful. So let me finalize my portion. I'll hand it over to Tom. I want to talk about 3D Creator, the role. Who is this for, right? So here's just some examples of, are we talking about replacing SolidWorks with this? No. But if you have field engineers that are using tablets and cell phones or some lightweight device that they need some CAD ability while they're out of the building, that might be you. You want to supplement SolidWorks Desktop, you want to be able to be mobile, this is where xDesign would fit. Maybe you're performing designs across multiple sites. Okay, this gives you the versatility without having to have a connection between the sites or sending data between sites. Maybe you have a shop floor that needs to do some really basic design needs and you don't need the full power of SolidWorks. Or the need to collaborate. We talked about the dashboard and the communities. This is your ability to collaborate using xDesign. So those are the types of companies that we see this fitting in. Some of the product highlights that we showed today: design guidance, next generation tool, super features. I think that's a big one. The ability to change design intent without rework, the single modeling environment, and the built-in version control. We focused on some of this last week, but version and revision control is built right in. You don't have to think about it. And then finally, I started my day off in my dashboard. That's the collaboration, the ability to talk and communicate about these things. So very, very powerful xDesign. Tom, let's go ahead and pass the mic over to you here, and I'll let you introduce the other half of this.
Okay. And I'm going to show my screen. Can you see my screen now?
I can.
Okay, beautiful. Let me minimize for a second, and so I get some stuff here. So Kevin put this whole thing together, and he came to me and he said, "Hey Tom, help me finish up this base." And so instead of using SolidWorks and surfacing, which I could have a lot of fun with, I'm going to jump into X shape pretty much as the creator, as the sculptor role. Okay, so we're going to hit the freeform modeling. Okay, so you see a lot of shapes here and a lot of stuff going on. This is really a different tool. We showed you 3D xDesign, I should say, and you're going to compare it to SolidWorks. What I'm going to show you, you're not going to compare it to any other SolidWorks product. Okay, so I'm going to jump right in because I'm looking at my watch and I got to move pretty quick. And you're going to notice right now I'm in xDesign. I'm in the same place where Kevin was a moment ago, but I'm going to work on this base. And so I'm going to double click on the base. I'm going to activate it. And then I'm just going to hit my X key and say, oh, let's get out of xDesign and let's get into X shape. So I just switched from one app to the other. I'm throwing a primitive in here. And this is really, this is completely different than how we worked in the past. I'm going to set this primitive up to kind of model things up a little closer, make it kind of a little thin. I started with a cube here. Now this particular part is very symmetric. You saw the two drawings that we've had there, and we'll talk about those in a second. But what I'm going to do is set this thing up, and I'm going to make it mirrored. So I'm mirroring it right down the middle. There's symmetry, and everything I do from now on is going to be dealing with being in the mirror. Now you also look at the lower right. I have the opacity setting pretty low. Probably too low, as you're going to find out, but this is the key to this app right here, is pulling and pushing on pins. And this is really from a learning curve. You kind of got to feel when you pull on some of these pins and some of these geometry, it affects the geometry next to it. So this is your learning curve. So I'm pulling, watch the pins that just came off that I just pulled, they're going to move a little bit too. So notice I'm just not quite pulling exactly where I'm wanting to go to, because I know the next work is going to go. Now I'm going real fast. As you guys can see, this is an iterative process. I should be going around this part probably one or two more times just to get refined. I'm going to pay the price for that later, and I'm going to show you how I'll get around that. So here's a quick little way just to get through, pretty close to the shape. There we go. So that's from the top view. Now we got some work to do because we're going to work on this thing now from the side view. Now again, remember, I'm in the assembly mode, so I'm moving around a little bit to get positioned. I'm going to change it to pick and faces, so I'm just picking faces. When I window around this, it's not getting the nodes, it's going to grab these particular faces. And what I want to do is tell it to give it a crease. I'm going to basically say, hey, this thing's going to sit on the ground. Now, a couple things you got to do, and whenever you learn anything new, you got to make sure you hit buttons. And one of the things when I did the crease, I had to tell it I'm done. This program is modal, very similar to how SolidWorks is modal. It's doing things till you tell it not to. So I'm going to go back to all entities so I can, not pick just the faces. I'm going to pick edges and everything like that. I'm just going to grab this one edge and I'm going to hit the delete key. And when I originally put the shape together, I gave it too much information. I'm like, I don't need that. So I'm simplifying it. Just like any surface modeling, you want the least amount of nodes you possibly can have. It's the same thing here. Now, this is really cool. Grabbing a bunch of points. You saw me push and pull. Here, I'm going to rotate them. Now, this is a little tight, kind of difficult. I just kind of wanted to show you that I could rotate them. I'm going to show you a different method. So I'm going to window around everything. And I'm going to use a line just to control it. I have another way to do this with a curve. And this is a lot of fun to play with, just to move around to get your shapes. Now, again, I'm moving really fast, so I have much more pushing and pulling to deal with that I just haven't done yet. But I just want to give you a good feel. Okay, so I'm done with aligning. I tell it I'm done. I turn this thing around just to get a better feel for it. So, this is going to be a plastic part, and we got to worry about the part itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into draft. We got about 1 degree of pull. I'm going to pull from the top. And notice the red and the yellow. Watch how I just adjust that. I'm just grabbing this particular face and let me slide it. I went the wrong way. Let's go the other way. Now I am going to remind you, a lot of iteration when you do this type of work. I'm going quick. I'm not coming back and checking my work. Kind of on a time clock right now, but you get a good feel for what occurred. So what are we, about 4 or 5 minutes in, and I got that far pretty quick. So the next thing I'm going to do is add another primitive. Now, I could leave xDesign right now, xShape right now and go right into xDesign and do this same thing. It's a pretty basic shape, but I'm going to add a cylinder. And I'm going to change the parameters on this, make it a little simpler. And if you recall from the prints from before, we had some dimensions. And so I'm kind of eyeballing it, but try to get a feel for this cylinder. So what I'm going to do is look straight down on this thing, and I'm going to adjust the size of it. So we're going to use a scale command here. I'm going to lower my opacity a little bit more even on that, just so I can make sure I'm grabbing the right things. And let me hide the pictures, hide the model. These little push pins, I'm just making sure I get on the outside edges. I'm going to make this 60 because that's what the print said. Like the result, let's come back to the side. So Kevin, I'm kind of a new user, so one of my challenges in the short term is just moving around. I'm just using the space bar, getting into the views, and you're going to notice a couple things. As you turn it a little bit, hit the view, it does spin around a little differently than SolidWorks. It's actually better. Now here, I probably should put a seam on the bottom, but I'm just going to move this up. So I want that cylinder to be completely inside the other part because we're going to go do a Boolean operation later on this. And I'll just move this guy down, just trying to match up the edges, and pretty close. Again, quick eyeball. Okay, so I'm pretty much done in X shape. We turn that back on so you see other parts, we hide it. And I got 2 primitives working in X shape. Looks pretty good. What I'm going to do now, I'm hitting my X key, going back to xDesign. So I'm just switching back and forth through the apps. Now, you saw a little bit with Kevin's work before. I'm going to go in and start using some features within with an xDesign. Now, let me hide those photos first. So, this is a pretty comprehensive toolbar, pretty similar to what you're seeing, thicken commands, split commands, move face. Where split is, I actually have underneath that the combine. So we're going to come in, we're going to grab the two pieces. And Kevin, you notice I had a warning on that. Might be an idea that if it didn't work right, I'd go back and look at my subdivision model from before, but didn't really need to work through it. Here, let's add a fillet. You saw Kevin do this a moment ago. Now, I'm going to do tangent propagation. I'm going to change the number, and this is what I do all the time. It's blue highlighted. I forgot to pick the face. I walked right by it. So let me go back and grab that face. You can see my preview. Everything's good. Now, Kevin, I don't know if you noticed this. We worked a little different on this. I drew a circle just to cut the hole through. And when I placed it, I just clicked off, hit escape, got out of circle. And when I highlighted the circle, all I had to do was just click on that little arrow and I could get right to the number. Just a different way to do it. We saw the 36 dimension from before, so let's just pop this hole through. And Kevin mentioned before, it doesn't get any easier now that we get through this stuff. I got a sketch. I'm going to go hit one feature. Didn't matter which one I hit. I could have switched what I did, but I'm going to cut. It's a solid. I really like the idea. I can do surfaces and thins at the same time. I'm going to go through one way and show me my preview. We're all set. So Kevin, did you notice anything with my part?
I noticed that if I tried to do that in SolidWorks, Tom, we'd be here for another day.
Oh yeah. So I mean, the draft
that's what
part,
I noticed.
This is the draft part, but I actually messed up. I moved so fast, you can see I didn't cover the base. So I'm in xDesign.
So give me 2 days.
My very first feature very well. So I better not put this in for a review because I'd kind of get hammered. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump in and fix this thing. And I'm going to tell you guys, it's going to take me about a minute. And I click on that subdivision where the prom is, and I just activate it. So now I'm back into X shape because that feature was made in X shape. So I didn't go tell it. It knew to do that. I'm going to come back into the very first thing you saw me do. I'm going to move fast again, so it's not going to be perfect. I probably should have turned on the picture so I could match it up, but let's just move those things out like you saw before. I might as well move one or two more out. Just enough. Now, I'm sure we have more editing to do. I'm not really doing this to fix it completely. I'm doing it more so you guys get the idea of what's happening. So yeah, I kind of get the idea. I don't see it anymore. I'm processing it. I'm done with the part. I double click on the monitor stand. I'm no longer editing the base. So if you just saw, I went from X shape to xDesign, back to X shape, back to xDesign in seconds.
Excellent.
Okay. So, that's the sculptor role. It's a lot of fun. I'm spending most of my time in my learning curve learning how to pull things so that it looks like the shape I want. And that's kind of the key part, that iterative process. But it is fast. This is pretty easy stuff to use. You can get shapes quickly. If you're not an artist, I'm not. This isn't going to make me one. But it's pretty amazing what I can get done. And as you saw, Kevin, how long would that have taken me to edit and using surface modeling, and how many curves would I had to make? Just a crazy amount.
Yep.
Okay. Now you saw our workflow. That one modeling environment, Kevin mentioned before, not assembly instructions, no assembly structure, I should say. And you saw me just move back and forth in that process. It was pretty straightforward to get done. So we're not disconnected at all. And we can share all this this part can go right back into SolidWorks if I'm working off it that way. I would actually still edit it back in X shape if that was the case. But I can get it to the right size and shape and do things. So if I need to go put ribs and do kinds of modeling in it, SolidWorks might be the best bet for that. So I think we're done with this presentation. We went a little longer than last week. I don't know who was long-winded, Kevin, you or I.
It was me.
We're ready for some questions now.
Yeah, if there's any questions or any of the folks on the call here, just post them into the question section of GoToWebinar, and we'll answer them now. I don't see any outstanding questions as of yet. I'll give a few minutes here. For those of you who don't have any questions, thanks for attending, and hopefully you got something out of this and get a little visual on what's going on behind the scenes here with 3D Experience. You know, if you have any questions, contact your sales rep, contact Tom or I, as it pertains to the particular offerings that we have now. Other than that, that is the end of our webinar. I do not see any questions. I'm kind of surprised by that, but hopefully, you know, you got something out of it. So thanks for attending. Take care.
Thank you.